That's right. We're doing it again. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to OC and TJ, aka the Colin O'Callahan Show. It's your boy Colin O'Callahan, and today we are previewing the AFC South. This is the fifth division preview. We've got 8 total divisions in entirety, so only 3 left to go. Let us just get it. Let us go. Let us just get it. Okay, I'm gonna stop stalling. Gonna share the screen here. I don't know why I have to click so many buttons just to do one simple task, but here we go. Let's start with the Houston Texans, who are coming off somewhat of a disappointing season, at least by their standards. Now, in theory, it looks great. 10 wins last year, AFC South title, won a playoff game, actually shut down Justin Herbert to win that playoff game. So kudos to them. But unfortunately, they came up short in the second round to the Kansas City Chiefs. The score was definitely a little bit deceiving because C.J. Stroud got sacked 8 times. There were a few gags on the special teams, and the defense just couldn't keep their composure. So that was pretty much one of the biggest reasons why their season came to the halt. But even then, throughout the regular season, it just felt like they ran into a complete sophomore wall. And I think C.J. Stroud is the first reason why we got to point this out, because last year he only threw 20 touchdown passes and 12 interceptions after only throwing, 5 his rookie season, and he was the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL. The only one that was higher was Caleb Williams. Last year, the offensive line ranked 29th in sacks and 29th in pressure percentage, and it got worse the minute they traded away Laramie Tunsil to Washington. They cut Shaq Mason. They pretty much said bye to Kenyon Green. So they signed Cam Robinson, who is not really that much of an upgrade, to be quite honest with you, at left tackle. I mean, there's a reason why Tuck Marrone, who's now the offensive line coach for the Patriots, pretty much advised, I don't really think, you'd want him to be your starting blindside blocker when the Patriots were looking for a left tackle. So you got Cam Robinson on the left, and you also drafted a rookie, Ariante Ursi, in the second round. They also signed Lincoln Tomlinson, and they traded for Ed Ingram. So to be quite honest, I don't see an upgrade at all when it comes to this offensive line. I mean, Titus Howard is that right guard after shifting him from right tackle. So it didn't get better at all. And I don't even think it got worse. I just think it's going to be the same as it was last year and, many years before, where it's just a lackluster and a very suckish offensive line. As for the skill positions, that group looks a lot different as well, because Joe Mixon, he's going to miss some time with a foot and an ankle injury. Last year, he was coming off a 1,000-yard season with 11 touchdowns, and he was quite possibly one of the only reasons why that offense wasn't even allowed to breathe for most of the time. And I know they signed Nick Chubb, but he looked like a shell of himself last year, coming back from that gruesome knee injury. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see, how he performs, and seeing what he could do for a brand new ball club. And Dameon Pierce, he pretty much has just fallen his way off the depth chart. So running back core, I'm not sure, especially with that subpar of an offensive line. I don't know if that's going to be their biggest strength. As for the wide receivers and the tight end, I think it's a pretty good unit. I mean, you got Nico Collins, who is the least of my worries. He's coming off a 1,000-yard season, and he only played 12 games last year, and he still managed to total just over 1,000 yards with 7 touchdowns. But you're going to be without Tank Dell for most of the year due to a gruesome knee injury he suffered just a week before Christmas against Kansas City. You lost Stephon Diggs to free agency. You were already without him for most of last year because of the torn ACL. So that's why they signed Christian Kirk in free agency, who is coming off 2 season-ending injuries in the past 2 seasons. He only played, 8 games last year, in total just 379 yards. So that's why they made the move to draft both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, both from the same school at Iowa State. Brock Purdy raves about both of those two. You can do so many things with them, and they're going to be immediate impactful players. And they also signed Justin Watson as an additional depth piece. So if C.J. Stroud could clean up the mistakes and, return to, the true form that he showed and the promise that he had in his rookie season, then there's no doubt that this Texas team is going to be well respected when it comes to the postseason. And, Dalton Schultz is a pretty good security blanket as well, along with Kate Stover. So I think offensively, you definitely know that it can win you enough games to get to the playoffs. You just wish that they don't, revert to the slump they were in last year, where, they feasted off a very terrible division. But when it came to those teams, they just laid down and died. And even when they did play against some subpar teams, They let it get they let those games come down to the wire, more frequently than it should have been. So, I mean, even the defense, who was their biggest strength of the season, showed that they were going through some rough patches as well. They were sixth in yards allowed, but they were also 14th in points. They had the fifth most takeaways. They were sixth on third down. But the one glaring statistic was that they were 27th in the red zone. So this is definitely a team that definitely broke more than bent in some instances. But if I look at this defense right here, you know that it is capable of being a top 5 unit. One big reason why, you got Will Anderson coming off an 11 sack season with 19 quarterback hits. Actually missed a few games and managed to put up those numbers. And you have an outstanding compliment in Danielle Hunter, who also finished with double-digit sacks, had 12 of them. They had the fourth most sacks, the Houston Texans overall. They were 14th at blitz percentage. They had the second highest pressure percentage in the National Football League. So when you look at this front four, I don't think it's going to be a weakness whatsoever. Mainly because you have those two guys, but also you've got good depth pieces like Darrell Taylor, Tim Settle, Mario Edwards, Sheldon Rankins, who has been more of a better run stuffer than a sacker. I think he actually had 6 a couple years ago, so that was honestly a bright spot, but you get my point. Don't really have to worry about that too much. The run defense, pretty much the same thing. They were 9th in yards per carry, and they were 11th in yards per game. But I don't even think Azeez Al-Shire nor Christian Harris is going to be the one to get the green dot. I think it's this guy right here, Henry To'oTo'o, who is pretty much one of the most underrated middle linebackers in all of football. He had 105 tackles, 1.5 sacks. This guy really blossomed, and he's developed into a blue-chip starting caliber linebacker. And Azeez Al-Shire has been solid as well. Don't get me wrong. In the 11 games that he played, he had 70 tackles and a couple sacks as well. But I think, they're going to build that run defense around this guy right here. The secondary is my favorite part of this whole defense. It is extremely lethal. You got so many playmakers on all sides. They were 4th in passer rating, 5th in yards per attempt. They gave up the fewest completion percentage. They were 6th in yards per game, and they had the second most interceptions in football. And a huge reason why was because of their number one shutdown corner, Derek Stingley, who is easily one of the top 5 corners in football. 5 picks, the fewest passer rating allowed at 56.9, at least amongst cornerbacks, I think. 18 passes defended, and that was second in the National Football League. And he was a first-team All-Pro selection. Got a handsome contract extension as a result, and rightfully so. And he's showing that he was certainly worth the 4th overall pick. And a great compliment to have is Kamari Lassiter, who is coming off the strong season as well. 5 picks, 10 passes defended, a 67 rate allowed, along with 58 tackles. This is a pretty underappreciated corner duo. And another player that I think people need to start paying closer attention to is Caleb Bullock, because in his rookie season, he showed that he could definitely be one of the best safeties in football. He gave up a 39.4 passer rating, 11 passes defended, 5 picks entering his second year, and it kind of camouflaged the sort of down year that Jalen Petrie had, because even though he had a bunch of tackles, he still gave up a rating over 108. So that's going to be a pretty fierce safety duo right there. You got the ball hawk, and you got the guy that can slow everything down in the run game. And I think it'll be even better with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's coming off a 6 interception season last year and got a Super Bowl ring with the Philadelphia Eagles. So here's my thing with the Houston Texans. Obviously, I think they're going to go into I'll put them in the just in category, or they'll get in category. But honestly, I don't see them winning any more than 9 or 10 games this season. And here's the reason why. Defensively, you got nothing to worry about. As long as you stay disciplined and as long as you don't get too many penalties like they were wont to do the year before, then they're going to be one of the top 5 units of football. It's just offensively, still have a lot that needs to be said. You got the quarterback, you got good skill position players, but you still have an atrocious O-line. And the only way I could really see the Texans establish themselves as a fair contender is if everything, starts to really come together. They got to minimize the mistakes. Offensive line, they really have to be the ones to step up the most. And you just got to make sure everybody stays healthy, because they can't lose any more pieces. You're already going to be without Joe Mixon, without Tank Dell. You lost Stephon Diggs last year. You were without Nico Collins for a good chunk of the season. And Christian Kirk is coming off 2 long-term injuries as well. So everybody just needs to stay on the field and, make some decent contributions. And then I think as long as everyone does that, then I think they'll be in pretty good shape. I don't know if I can say the same thing about the Indianapolis Colts, though, and there's one big reason why. It's the quarterback position because the competition is between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, who, by the way, both of them played pretty well in the preseason game yesterday against the Green Bay Packers. They unfortunately lost of the last second touchdown, but those two weren't on the field to control the outcome. It was those two guys right here. Former Duke guy, or actually Notre Dame guy. Yeah, Notre Dame and Jason Bean. I actually forgot what school he went to, but the point was I don't really know if this is an inspiring quarterback competition because one guy had the worst completion percentage out of all active starting quarterbacks in the National Football League, only threw 8 touchdown passes with 12 picks and a 61 passer rating. And another guy who threw 8 touchdown passes as well with 7 picks, but he got released midseason by the Giants and was pretty much told, we don't even think you should be the backup or the third stringer. We'll have you play scout team safety, and then we'll just let you go because you're pretty much useless to us now. That's what the Giants made of Daniel Jones last year. So, honestly, that's going to be the one thing holding them back. And I said I was going to hold them back last year, and look how that turned out. And it shouldn't be because look at this offense. Like, these are quality pieces that are just getting wasted. You got one of the best running backs in football in Jonathan Taylor, an outstanding receiving trio. They drafted Tyler Warren in the first round, and your offensive line has been one of the more solid units in the league 5 out of the last 6 seasons. I mean, look at the stats right here. They were seventh, they gave up the 7th fewest sacks, but they were 24th in pressure percentage. But then again, when you got Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, that's pretty much what you're running yourselves into. And I'm scared that's going to be the same thing, especially with a guy that not only tends to hold on to the ball too long, but pretty much gets it popped out of his hands on occasion. So they lost Ryan Kelly in free agency. They also lost Will Freese. So you got Tanner Bortolini stepping up into the starting center position. You've got Matt Goncalves stepping into a similar role at right guard. Still got Bernard Raymond, who just got paid a nice extension. You still got the best left guard in Quentin Nelson and a pretty solid right tackle in Braden Smith. But it's just the quarterback. I don't think there's anything else that I really need to say or repeat. Defensively, they're nowhere near as good as, the offense is going to be because they fired Gus Bradley and they replaced it with Lou Anarumo, who, to be quite honest, I don't really consider to be that much of an upgrade because he's coming off a pretty abysmal 2-year stretch with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I understand his units were well improved when they went to the Super Bowl and when they went to the conference championship the following year. But since then, they have really fallen off a cliff, and the Colts defense is nowhere near as different as the Cincinnati Bengals. 24th in points, 29th in yards. They did have the 7th most takeaways, but they were also the 3rd worst on 3rd down, and they were 23rd in the red zone. So you've got a lot of guys that are opportunistic and can get their hands on the ball and make plays, but, they're also a team that's going to get picked apart a lot from time to time. The pass rush was supposed to be their biggest strength, but even that side of the ball took a major drop off because they were 25th in sacks with 36. They were 28th in blitz percentage, and they were 23rd in pressure percentage. And I think a big reason why was just because a lot of these guys on the list were not healthy. Samson Ebukam missed all of last year to a torn ACL. He'll be back. Hopefully he can, it's a pretty hard position to have a full bounce back season from, but hopefully you can at least, see that, he is truly getting better with the rehab and the progression. So he's coming back. DeForest Buckner still playing at a solid level. Only 12 games played last year, but 6.5 sacks, 14 quarterback hits. Quiddy Pay coming off his best season, or a pretty strong season, I should say. 8 sacks in 15 games. Laiatu Latu had a pretty promising rookie year with 4 sacks as well. So when you look at it on paper, this should be a solid front 7. Not to mention you've got a great run stuffer at Grover Stewart. You got Tyquan Lewis is still there. You've got some depth pieces with Eric Johnson and Neville Gallimore. And your run defense has the league's leading tackler in Zaire Franklin. Not only that, but I think he had the most solo tackles, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, I'm thinking of a different player. I'm sorry. But 173 tackles is actually it's really impressive. 11 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles. I mean, the Colts were 8th in rush yards per carry, so that was honestly one of the least of their issues. They lost DJ Speed in free agency, but I've always liked Segun Olubi, so I think he'll definitely be a quality rotational piece, a good right-hand man for Franklin to make sure that, the second level is taken care of. And one big thing that I think, the Colts did a pretty good job of trying to improve was their secondary. But if I look at it, I can really only see maybe one or two guys that, can have a strong season. I mean, Travarius Ward, that's a pretty promising signing because he's been a well-respected veteran for, since the time he's been in the league with Kansas City and the 49ers and now Indianapolis. But he's coming off a pretty bad season or down year by his standards. 123.4 passer rating allowed. And I understand there were things in his personal life that, were kind of clouding that season. So I'm not going to completely, criticize him in that regard by any stretch, but you definitely know he's going to want to have a fresh new start and a better season as a result. They signed Cam Bynum, who posted better numbers, 62.5 passer rating with a few picks. So he is definitely, a good replacement for Julian Blackmon. And he's a good complement for Nick Cross, who had over 146 tackles, but has a lot to be desired when it comes to his passing coverage. 105 passer rating allowed. Did have a few interceptions, but then again, that's just what happens, when teams try to pick on you a lot. You got two decent corners. You got, honestly, one of the best slot corners in Kenny Moore the second. Still playing at a high level, 82.8 passer rating. With Jalen Jones, more or less the same thing, an 80 passer rating allowed, a couple picks, 100 tackles as well. So on paper, this should be like a pretty decent secondary, but you just, with Lou Anarumo taking over, you need a standout pass rusher. It's most likely going to be Kwity Paye. And more importantly, you just need to make sure that they take that massive leap that they haven't been able to take over the last two seasons. It's one of the biggest reasons why Gus Bradley was let go, because in a team with, that much talent and with that much name recognition, you should at least be a pretty above average unit. And they were nowhere near that. Just look at the Giants game last year when Drew Lock was picking them apart. So I'm going to be honest here. I do not have a lot of faith in the Colts this year. I'm honestly going to put them in the number one pick contention. And here's the reason why. Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are on the hottest of seats right now. Shane Steichen showed plenty of promise in his first year. He nearly took the Colts to the playoffs with Anthony Richardson missing most of the season and with Gardner Minshew as his backup. But the QB carousel last year just caused a lot of players to lose trust, a lot of confidence, a lot of belief. And I know Shane Steichen was in a very tough position because he's not the one making these football decisions, but there does come a time where if you're just, if you continue to stumble and you're not figuring it out, then your voice is going to get lost in the locker room. And until you can really, clean this up and figure out what's going wrong, not just with the team itself, but what you can do better in your job, then this is going to be a pretty forgetful season. And your time as a head coach with this football team is not going to last long. Chris Ballard is in a worse position than Shane Steichen is. Why? Because ever since Andrew Luck retired, his decision-making has been outright abysmal, especially when it comes to the quarterback position. They didn't have a contingency plan for when he retired, so they started Jacoby Brissett, missed the playoffs. They signed Phillip Rivers, sent him off into the sunset with a playoff appearance, but lost that one. Carson Wentz, that completely failed, especially in the final few weeks of the season. Matt Ryan, absolutely washed up. And Sam Ehlinger and Nick Foles were nowhere near the backups that they should. The promised land. And then we had last season where it was just absolutely frustrating. The fact that they were even in playoff contention until like the final week or two of the season was just outright startling because the offense had no quarterback guiding them in the right direction. Their defense was really holding them back in more than a few losses this season. And more importantly, they were just going through some of the worst rough patches you could have ever seen for a team that should have never even been in the conversation in the first place. So that's why I have them in number one pick contention until they can finally figure out who their future is going to be. And if their defensive side and if their defensive issues can get taken care of, then I don't see them winning any more than 4 to 6 games this season. I'm sorry to say that. Jacksonville Jaguars, honestly, they're in a little bit of a better position because they have a new general manager, they have a new head coach, but we need to see what we got from Trevor Lawrence because he's had a pretty pedestrian career. Now, the rookie season, we've always given him a pass for that because of Urban Meyer and, how much turmoil or how much more turmoil, I should say, he brought to that organization. Thought he could turn the corner after his second year when he was able to bring the Jaguars out of a 4-8 slump, take them to the playoffs, come back from a 27-0 deficit against the Chargers in the playoffs, but unfortunately coming up short of Kansas City the next week. And then since then, you collapse after an 8-3 start, and then the following year, it was just pretty much rock bottom. The worst you've had since that rookie season. Career-wise, he's 22-38. He's thrown 69 touchdown passes with 46 interceptions. Numbers that are eerily similar to one Daniel Jones. I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is, worse or anywhere near Daniel Jones' abilities as a quarterback, but you know that this needs to be the best season you've had because there's a reason why they give you all that money. You are supposed to be the face of that franchise. You're the one that's supposed to be the reason why this team is going to be in contention for the division and why they're going to be a playoff contender year in and year out. And instead, CJ Stroud is doing that with the Houston Texans. And you're the first overall pick of the draft in 2020. I know that's not saying much, but you were supposed to be the best quarterback that we've seen since Peyton Manning, and you have not come close to reaching those expectations. Offensively, with Liam Cohen taking charge, I think, you know what? If you can get a strong season out of Baker Mayfield, then I don't know how he can't do I don't know how he can't do the same with Trevor Lawrence. And when you look at the supporting cast, it's not great, but it's not horrible at the same time. I like this running back tandem of Tank Bigsby and ETN. You got a strong focal point of your passing attack in Brian Thomas Jr. And also, you drafted Travis Hunter with the second overall pick. And it's more likely than not that he's going to blossom more as a wide receiver than he is at corner. You got De'Ami Brown, Parker Washington, Trenton Irwin as supporting options. Let go of Christian Kirk, obviously. You lost Evan Ingram. You lost Gabe Davis. You cut them, I should say. But these aren't bad consolation prizes. And more importantly, I think Brendan Strange is going to develop into a pretty strong tight end in this league. Because last year, he was pretty much Mac Jones' favorite target last year when Trevor Lawrence went down, not just with the shoulder injury, but the concussion he suffered against the Houston Texans. So I'm not saying this is going to be a great offense, but I really just hope if they can get anywhere in the 10 to 15 range, then that's progress. In the offensive line, I know that there are people who are saying, oh, this was horrible. It was not a great group last year. But when you think of the quarterback carousel that they had and the struggles they had on that side, I don't really know if you can necessarily blame them because they still allowed the 7th fewest sacks. They were 5th in pressure percentage. They signed Patrick McCarry. They lost Cam Robinson, which is kind of a plus more than a minus. They still have Ezra Cleveland, Anton Harrison's, taking over at right tackle. And I think Walker Little is, going to be that next blindside blocker. And Anton Harrison is actually coming off a pretty strong season. So Robert Hainsey, knowing his time from the Bucs, he's not terrible. He's not great. I'd say he's just an average center. So hopefully that doesn't turn into a huge, weakness for them. But I think with Liam Cohen taking over, I expect improvement and I expect better results. I don't know if I could say the same about their defense, though, because there were only 2 reasons why that was even relevant in the first place. And we all know who. Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. Allen's coming off an 8-sack season. Trayvon Walker, 10.5. Yet their defensive line only had 34 sacks, which was 28th in the league. They were dead last in blitz percentage, and they had the 3rd worst pressure percentage in the National Football League. So really, those 2, once again, were the only 2 people carrying that defense, let alone their front 4. I thought Eric Armstead would be a good, quality pass rusher, but he's coming off probably his worst season of his career. And I look at the rest of this group, and I just don't really see who can really step up. Maybe Emmanuel Ogbah, but, he hasn't really been good in the last few years. DeJuan Smoot is not the same player that he was in 2020 or even 2019 for that part. Davon Hamilton is a good run stuffer, but he's not great. So I'm scared that they're going to run into the same position as they have been in the last 2 seasons. The run defense, kind of the same thing. They were struggling. 12th in yards per carry, 25th in yards per game. You should have 2 good linebackers in Foyesade Oluokun and Devin Lloyd. They're both coming off 100 tackle plus seasons, but they have a lot that needs to be desired, not just, in yards after contact, but also in their coverage skills as well. The secondary is probably my biggest concern because I don't know if Travis Hunter is going to be the answer in the secondary the way that he could be in your offense. I know that he wants to play both sides, and I'm not rooting against him. I love Travis Hunter, and I hope that he can pull it off. But at the same time, there's a reason why, like the NFL, one of the biggest cliches is that it's 100% guarantee that you're going to get injured. And I don't know if playing both sides in the NFL is going to work the way it did in the Big 12 or whatever other conference you played in when you were in college. So I don't know what's going to happen on that front, but I hope that gets figured out soon because they have 4 defensive backs on their roster. Tyson Campbell, Monteric Brown, Darnell Savage, and Antonio Johnson that gave up a rate over 100. He was supposed to be your number one corner, but he's coming off a down season. Darnell Savage and Antonio Johnson, I've never really liked them as, 2 starting safeties. Monteric Brown, he's okay, but he's not great. That's why they signed Jordan Lewis in free agency to fill his role in the slot. Jerry Jones, he's coming off a pretty strong rookie season. He's a pretty unheralded player. Had, I think he only gave up a rate over 90 last season, so those are pretty good numbers. And then Eric Murray, who honestly has been a surprising name to watch, had I'm trying to look at my numbers here. Yeah, he's coming off a year where he gave up an 80 passer rating allowed as well. So I just don't know. You got too many issues on the defensive side, and offensively, you need to see more from Trevor Lawrence. That's why I think they're probably going to be either in the not good category or the number one pick contention. So they got a tough schedule, so they honestly might be in this conversation. But I think for the purposes of this show, I don't want to be too cruel and say they're going to win fewer than 5 games, but honestly, I think that's where they're at right now. So, and the Tennessee Titans, I'm scared they're probably going to be in that same position. But on the other end, you're hoping that Cam Ward can be the next Jaden Daniels and CJ Stroud, taking an organization that has been deep in the you-know-what and putting them back on the map and giving them the respectability and the credibility that they once had in the past. So I'm hoping that Cam Ward has that type of a season. But if I look at this offense around him, I'm not sure. It's giving me Washington Commanders vibes from last year. But at the same time, I need to really see it before I can actually believe it. I like Tony Pollard. He's coming off a 1,000-yard season, which is really remarkable considering that he struggled to recover from that ankle injury he suffered in the playoffs a few years back and didn't really have a great season, his last year in Dallas. So I was really happy for Pollard in that regard. Tyjae Spears, a great third down back, catches passes out of the backfield, can also, do his best to split between the tackles and get plenty of yards after contact. So I like the running back tandem there. The wide receiver core, you got Calvin Ridley coming off a 1,000-yard season, which honestly is good considering that he did not have a quarterback at all last year, whether it was Will Levis or Mason Rudolph. Tyler Lockett coming over from the Seattle Seahawks. Don't really know what to expect. Showed last year that he was not the same player that he was when he was with Russell Wilson, but maybe a new change of scenery could help in that regard. And Van Jefferson, he's a good supporting option, but I don't know if he's going to be, the third one that Tennessee really needs. That's why I think they drafted 2 guys here in Elika Ayomanur and Shamari Dike in the mid-round, second or third round picks to make sure that, Cam Ward had some younger thoroughbreds that were, going to become immediate impactful players. Chig Okonkwo, I've always thought he was a pretty decent tight end, but they also drafted Gunnar Helm for a reason, the rookie out of Texas. So I'm curious to see how this offense is going to work because Brian Callahan definitely has a lot of ground that he's got to make up for the abysmal first year that he had in 2024, especially when it comes to this offensive line, because I do not have faith in it whatsoever. Dan Moore Jr., they gave him too much money, in my opinion. He gave up so many sacks last season, and the fact that they actually gave him, north of $50 million guaranteed to be their blindside blocker, I don't see, how they get better with that signing. I like Kevin Zeitler. He's a good right guard. He's been one of the best right guards in football for a long time now, but he's also 35 years old. Like, he's not getting any younger. You got J.C. Latham, you got Pete Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry at center. So who knows? Maybe a new quarterback could could, clean things up a little and it could kind of camouflage those flaws. But I can only hope that Cam Ward doesn't get thrown in too huge of a fire and, just completely flame out right away because that would be absolutely awful. And it wouldn't be an indictment on him necessarily, but just the organization for just being so incompetent over the years. Defensively, who they're a tough one to gauge. They gave up the second fewest yards, but they also gave up the third most points in the National Football League. So that's honestly pretty mind blowing. But then again, I think that's what happens when your offense turns the ball over at an alarming rate. I think they had the second most interceptions out of anybody else in the National Football League. So it's no wonder why you give up that many points and why you have that many negative statistics as they already show. I I am okay with some of the pieces that they have. I mean, not too many standout guys. You still got Jeffrey Simmons anchoring the pass rush, but you also lost Harold Landry. You still got Arden Key. They signed Draymond Jones. But that's an area that they really need to boost up quickly because they were 29th in sacks with just 32. They were 22nd in blitz percentage, 28th in pressure percentage. So they're hoping for a breakout year for Devondre Sweat. They got a good run stuffer with Sebastian Joseph Day, who could also attack the passer as well. Carlos Watkins, I always like him as a depth piece. So really, you just need to make sure that someone else is going to help out Jeffrey Simmons and make sure that they emerge as a key focal point of that front four. Run defense, middle of the pack. 18th in yards per carry, 21st in yards per game. They added Cody Barton, but you don't really have a right-hand man besides maybe James Williams because you lost Jack Gibbons. You lost Kenneth Murray Jr. Not huge losses, but it kind of left that linebacking position void for the most part. And as for the secondary, listen, I think one of the biggest reasons why they struggled the way they did last year was just the mere fact that they couldn't stay healthy. L'Jarius Sneed only played 5 games. Jarvis Brownlee, he's entering his second year, coming off a strong 91.2 rating. Amani Hooker, 5 picks, 69.5 passer rating allowed. They signed Xavier Woods, who gave up an 86 rate allowed, had close to 120 tackles, a few interceptions. And Roger McCreary is also coming off a down year as well, 101 passer rating allowed. So I think if he's fully healthy, then he can pretty much prove to you why, he got the contract that he, deserved at the time, why he was a huge key piece to the Chiefs Super Bowl titles, back-to-back Super Bowl championships, I should say, and, be the shutdown corner that we know him to be. I mean, they re-signed Quandre Diggs, who, to be quite honest, I didn't think he was actually going to come back just because of how last year panned out. So it's a decent defense, but you need a lot of question marks from their offense. I clicked that tab a little too early. I'll be honest, I'm going to put them in this category as well. I will actually not be surprised if they find themselves in one of these two tiers just because of, the pattern with high draft pick quarterbacks, coming over, taking over a team to save the day, putting them back on the map, and emerging as a superstar before our very eyes. But again, this is just a team that I really need to see what they could do before I could believe that things are truly going to turn out to be a lot better than they used to be. So I'm going to wrap it up here. But before we go, let's see which division we are going to preview tomorrow afternoon. I like it. So we got the NFC North. That is going to be an outstanding division because you've got the Detroit Lions, who are trying to repeat once again and show that they don't really need Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn to make another deep playoff run. The Green Bay Packers, they're kind of in the same situation as the Houston Texans, where they had a good season, but not the great one that a lot of people were hoping them to have. Minnesota Vikings have J.J. McCarthy taking over as their starting quarterback. So you need to make sure that, A, he's fully healthy, B, that he's developing into the franchise quarterback that they need, and C, that, Sam Darnold's success was truly indicative of the team around him more so than him really coming over and blossoming. I'm not throwing any shit on Darnold whatsoever, but I think if Sam Darnold could win 14 games, I think J.J. McCarthy should have a good season as well. So that's my point. And then the Bears just hired Ben Johnson to be their new head coach, and there's a lot of hope in the Windy City because maybe Caleb Williams will finally have the coach that he needs to make sure he develops and that he progresses in the right direction and shakes off a pretty forgetful rookie season. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. We'll be back tomorrow to preview the NFC North. We're only a few away, so the fun is just beginning. So long. Goodbye.